I don't want to. Hi. Hello. Sorry. Technical difficulties out the gate. I set this up to go live on both YouTube and on Facebook, and it turns out YouTube doesn't want me to go live if I'm horizontal. It only wants me to be live vertical, which is crazy because I'm simply not going to do that. But apparently that's all it wants from me. So, oh my gosh. Hi. Hello YouTube. Hello Facebook. Hello everybody who's watching later on whatever platform you're watching on. Apparently I have to do this simultaneously vertical and horizontal. This is gonna be wild. Hi everyone. Let me see if I could turn on comments. Yes, I should be able to have comments. Great. Okay. Hi Kimberly. Okay, great. So, hello. Hi Ty. Hey, yay. Okay, so at least Facebook is working. The old guard, unusual and different for me. A thing I've done a million times is actually working the way it was originally supposed to. Isn't that wild? So hello. Right. Essentially, I'm trying to figure out a way to either simultaneously cast on Facebook and YouTube, or to eventually migrate over to YouTube, because it seems like Facebook just doesn't want to do video anymore. They seem to be pretty much throttling it, except for really short stuff. So, yeah, that's all. I'm experimenting with new technology, which, let me tell you all, is not great for me. I'm not really good at new technology. It's not my strong point. This girl, not an early adapter. Lavender, you're in Denver. What are you going to see? Lavender says in the comments, everybody, that they're in Denver, and that is because they're going to a K-pop show, and now I need to know which K-pop so that I can judge you wildly for your choices. The judgment is all good. The fact that you're going to K-pop at all, as far as I'm concerned, is wonderful. But I love knowing which group you stand, because then I can decide all about you as a person. It's like knowing. So I was a bartender for years, everybody, and it means that I judge you on what choice of beverage you choose. And by judge, I mean I decide your personality type. So whatever you order from me, I'll immediately categorize you. It's a little bit like, a Myers-Briggs, but for bartenders and booze. That was a wild tangent to start off our live. Hi, everybody. I'm Gail Carriger. I'm your resident talking head author person, aka the author beast. I just got back from a retreat, actually. And at the retreat, the awesome organizer made us like specialized swag, and so I got specialized swag, which one of them was our name embroidered on a little throw blanket, and look at my little throw blanket. Isn't it great? It's for those of you who are not seeing this in the correct direction, it says Author Beast on it. So I have this baby waffle throw blanket that says Author Beast, and I'm really chuffed about it. It was a gift for attending this retreat, which I think was very cute. Betsy asks, judging people on teas. Well, there comes a point, I'm really not snobbish about alcohol, but I am quite snobbish about tea. So there comes a point with tea where I can't really use it to judge personalities because I know too much. I don't know how else to put it, except that I'm too invested. And so I can't be relaxed about it. I have too many feelings about tea, and so I cannot be objective and relaxed about pronouncing judgment upon the world based on tea. But alcohol, no problem. Yeah. Speaking of which, this afternoon I am not, in fact, drinking tea. I was gonna, and then I didn't have time to boil water. We should tell you how my day's been going so far. Instead, I am drinking this, which is just a, pseudo soda, no sugar thingamajigger. I really love, weirdly, the orange vanilla. I don't really like orange vanilla soda, but it turns out I really like orange vanilla flavoring in not soda. Just because it makes me feel like it's a special. There's something about, or like it makes me feel like it's a dessert or it's a treat or something. So it's become one of my favorite sodas, is the La Croix. I mean, this is Waterloo or whatever, like not to brand name anything, but there it is. So I put in the description on Facebook, and it'll eventually be in the description on YouTube, all what I'm wearing, but just in case anybody needs to know immediately, the lipstick I'm wearing is MAC's Ruby Woo. It's old school classic red lipstick that I recently just rediscovered. Like, of course I used to use it a decade ago, and then I was like, maybe I want to try bullet lipsticks again. Turns out I'm still not wild about the bullet lipstick, but I decided to go back to my old stalwart favorite, MAC's Ruby Woo, and frankly, it still looks great. It's still super vintage. I still love it. It's wildly expensive, of course, because it's MAC, but I just got the tiny little bullet one. So I also like the mini. I like the mini bullets, and they're easier to apply when they're smaller. So that's the lipstick I'm wearing. And now we can briefly discuss, you know, some of what's coming in the next Chirrup, which is I decided to turn the next Chirrup into just like a comfort Chirrup. Like, yeah, it's talking about the stuff I usually talk about, but there's also a bunch of like coping techniques and comfort and like what I'm doing to make myself feel better about life right now. And one of the things that I did, which surprised the old stalwarts, it should surprise none of you, but I reread this series, which is Feasts and Worts, Servant of the Empire, Daughter of the Empire, and Mistress of the Empire. It's a trilogy. It's sort of an alternate Asia, Japan-ish kind of fantasy world that's at war via a rift that has opened, a magical rift that has opened up. And it's just very like political machinations, tons of characters, extremely complicated and juicy, and very not reality, like not here, not present day. And I just find myself like, that's the kind of thing turns out I really reach for when I need to escape. And so this is like my favorite escapism. So I thought I would recommend that. If you all want to recommend like your favorite escapist books, that really just sort of help get you away from the everyday, please feel free to do so in the comments. I'd love it. Love to read that. Oh, Billy, it's one of your favorites. Yay! It's like it's known, but it's like an older series, so it's not that well known. But for me, at least, it's withstood the test of time, which frankly, not all the fantasy books from the 90s do stand the test of time, but that one does for me. So I really, really love it. And I find myself, ever since I read it, and I must have read it about, 20 years ago or something, I pretty much reach for it once a year. And it always helps me. So yeah, please recommend what helps you, just in case it might help somebody else. But technically today, I said that we were going to talk about series and what it's like to write a series and like kind of why you pick a series or a standalone as an author and all that sort of stuff. So I'm hoping you have some questions for me about series and how series work. From a writer perspective or from a reader perspective. We can go any way. You can also, always please leave a comment if you have a favorite series to recommend. That's awesome. I see people watching on YouTube, but I can't seem to see any chat. So, oh, there it is. Oh my goodness. This is very exciting. I'm getting chat on both channels now. Yay! Okay, so this is the point where I remind you all to please put a question mark at the beginning if you have a specific question that you would like me to answer. Oh, and there's SH with a question. Glorious. Okay, let's give this a try. So SH wants to know, I'm just going to scroll real quickly back through and see if anybody's left an older question that I missed. And it looks like, no, everyone's just tuning in and saying hi. Wonderful. Thank you all. So SH wants to know how I got the idea for the San Andreas Shifters. So the San Andreas Shifters are the fault of marine biology. And marine biology is the fault of somebody reaching out to me ages ago to ask if I would participate in an anthology. And this was shortly after Soulless and Changeless and maybe even Blameless had come out. So the books had been relatively or pretty successful at that time. And so she reached out to me to participate in a large anthology and specifically wanting a steampunk thing, something set in the Parasolvers. And I said, at the time, because I was feeling very bossy, and uppity. And this was a long time ago, everybody. I'm not going to tell you how long, but it was a long time ago, over 10 years. And I said, I'll do it for you, but I want to do something more contemporary set, and it was for an urban fantasy thing. And so, you know, I had some flexibility. It wasn't like it's for a steampunk thing. And I said I would like to do a queer story. Because at that point, that anthology series had no queer stories in it. It had only had heterosexual romances, and I was like, let's change it up a bit, shall we? And they said, well, if we must. And I said, if you would like me to write for you, you must. And so I wrote the short story Marine Biology for that anthology, which I don't do anymore. I mostly don't write for anthologies anymore. It's just very time consuming. I don't consider myself super great at short stories. It's not where I think my strong point is as a writer. Anyway, so I wrote this short story Marine Biology, and then I was like, oh, I love these characters, and there's a whole series in here. So that is one way a series happens. You write something small and little, and you think, meh, and then you think, oh no, this is very inspiring, and I feel like there's an entire series going on. So that's what happened. And then it sat on the back burner for a little while I thought about it and where the series would go. And that's when I started to write the first book in that series. So essentially, I booted the San Andreas Shifters series up and running into its current form, which is a multi-book, multi-short story format. And I did that because I wanted to write something specifically that wasn't Parasolverse, that wasn't the Parasol Protectorate, that I could write because I would be out of contract under those circumstances full length. So I wanted to write some full length books that were interconnected, but not a series in the sci-fi fantasy sense of the word series where it's a continuing story arc between book. I wanted to make them so that you could pick one book up in the middle if you felt like it and you wouldn't feel like you were lost. So yeah, so that's what I did. I did this sort of multi-purpose, multi-functional series, both to give myself a break from the Parasolverse and write something different, to experiment in a different genre and a different time period, and to like push the self-publishing side into an arena that I hadn't gotten to go yet, which was full-length novels that were self-published. And so it had multifunctional things, the San Andreas books. I also found them at the time much easier to write than the steampunk stuff because I didn't have to do as much research. So and that's one of the reasons I set them locally to me. I set them in familiar time and place, at least as obviously the current time and place does not have magic and it does not have shifters. But I chose a local area for me so that I wouldn't have to do as much research as I do, hoping to cut down on how long it would take me to write things. When I write set in the Victorian era, I actually do a lot of research before I start breaking the rules of that time period. Sometimes because I want to keep the history of the day in place, and sometimes because I need to know the rule if I'm going to break it. But for local stuff, for things that are set here in the Bay Area, I don't have to worry about it as much. So yeah, so the many reasons I chose this series in particular. The sci-fi stuff is different again. So I always love sci-fi and I love to write sci-fi. So I always wanted to write it. So again, for those of you who aren't really familiar with my back catalog, Crudrat, which technically came out only a couple of years ago, I actually wrote over a decade ago. It's the second book I wrote after Soulless. I wrote Soulless, and then I wrote Crudrat, and then I wrote Changeless. And that was just because I wanted something completely different, and I wanted to try something completely different. And I love science fiction. And generally I reach for science fiction when I want to like chew on a concept, when I want to really think about something sort of philosophically. And it's easier for me to conceptualize and discuss those sorts of topics as a writer and as a fiction writer when I'm working aliens into the mix. I naturally reach for like the creation of whole cloth culture. Again, I think this is my anthropology background. So yeah, so that's why the sci-fi stuff happens. Now, the Tinkered Star Song series happened because I needed to leave the planet. It happened during the pandemic. I couldn't write for a really long time, and I kept trying to write either Parasolverse or San Andreas Shifter stuff, and it turned out that my brain was not happy on Earth. And my brain was like, no, no, no. The Tinkered Stars, you got to go into your sci-fi universe. And then I was like, you're right, brain, and instincts and romance, right? Like all of my heart was like yearning for the stars. And so I just went there. Like I went to the stars, and I had been really escaping reality via both K-dramas and K-pop and music and art at the time. And so that made me really thinking about sort of the nature of celebrity and the nature of art and the nature of like music and creation as a propaganda machine, both for good and evil, both for like salvation, but also, you know, for corruption, and how those things can manifest. And so that caused me to write the Tinkered Star Song series. And I kind of knew instinctively, and this is the bit where I don't know how to articulate this. This is the like writer brain bit. But I knew instinctively that the Tinkered Star Song series was a trilogy. Everything I needed to say, I was going to be able to say it in 3 books. They were going to be full-length books, and I was going to have to write them back to back. So I took like 2 years pretty much just to write all of those books. And I needed to get them out of my system. And the act of writing those books was as much a coping mechanism. Weirdly, recently, I've been thinking of reaching and rereading those books for comfort as the non-creator, which is very strange for me. I don't normally reread my own work that often. So that was weird. We can put that one to one side. The San Andreas books, when I started writing them as a series, I actually intentionally kept them sort of open-ended so that I could write in the series when and if I felt like it. So they were not conceived like the Tinkered Star Song was as this sort of neat trilogy, or indeed how Etiquette and Espionage and the Finishing School series that was conceived as a 4-book series. That's always how I intended to write it. I had it all planned out. I thought of it as 4 books. The Tinkered Star Song, 3 books, very solidly. The San Andreas Shifters, not sure. It's feeling like Dratsie Dilemma is going to be a good kind of end cap for it, but I don't necessarily have to stop. There could always be more of the San Andreas Shifter universe. In fact, I have ideas for more in that universe. So they're a little bit more like sort of the tie-in novellas are for the Parasolverse, or they operate that way in my creative brain. So yeah, I tend to think of series as various different things. So in terms of like whether they're going to be a linked story arc series of interconnected characters or the same main character, or whether they're going to be sort of standalones that are interconnected, it kind of depends. And sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it just happens that way, you know? The creative mindset. What was I going to say about, the Parasolverse, the other 2 series is in the Parasolverse. So the Finishing School series was conceived, pitched, and written as a quad, as 4 books. The Parasol Protectorate was originally written with Solus as a standalone, and then I had intended to write the spin-offs of Prudence's series. So Solus was meant to be just 1. But then when it sold to a publishing house, they actually had me under contract for 2 in a series. And I was like, oh, am I writing a series? Okay, I guess I am. And so that's when I wrote Changeless. And then I realized I had too much to say. And so Changeless has a cliffhanger. And so then I got the contract for Blameless. And then I scattered too many loose ends in Changeless so far as the world building was concerned. So then I had to write 3 books. So that series, the Parasol Protectorate series, is kind of accidentally 5 books. That's just what happened with it. But you know, it's my first series, so I didn't know what I was doing. It should come as no shocker to you. Finishing School, tight, conceived, end to end. We like that as a bit of an OCD creative. I like to be organized, so made very happy by that. And so I could be a little bit more intentional with the Custard Protocol as well. The Custard Protocol was conceived, written, and kind of marketed and kind of contracted and argued over as 2 duologies. So I wrote and was under contract for Prudence and Imprudence, and I didn't know if I would be writing the final 2 of that series, or if maybe I would be doing those independent, if I would be doing it with a different publisher or whatever. So because things were very unsettled in New York and in my publishing house at the time. So that is why they exist the way they exist, as sort of couplets. And that's why there's only 4 of those. because it was 2 sets of 2. Yeah, there is series is. Now I see that I saw out of the corner of my eye that I have some more questions. I'm going to scroll back, make sure I get them. Oh goodness, you guys are chatty today. That's so nice. Hi everybody. Also, YouTube, I see that you are chatting occasionally too, but YouTube doesn't keep showing me the comments the way I get them in Facebook. So like if you ask a question, you might have to ask more than once so that I actually see the darn thing. Oh, technology, why am I so bad at it? There must be an easier way to do this. Sometime we'll figure it out. So there's, Lavender has a question. How would you time releases in a series when indie publishing versus trad? Oh, that's a very, Lavender asking the deep questions. I have missed you. Did I like the Tinkered Star Song timing? Okay, this is a great question. So this is going to get a little nitty gritty in terms of the Somebody Loves Marvin. I love Marvin too. Marvin's one of my favorite characters. Fortunately, in the new book, there's a lot of Marvin because we're in with the Sea People. So you get some real insight into Marvin's character. That was a total aside. Let's get back to Lavender's question. Releasing a series timing-wise. So trad dictates the release of a series if I'm with a traditional publisher. So I have little to no say in how rapidly they release things. As a general rule, in traditional publishing, as an author who's writing a series with a science fiction or a fantasy house, once a year is the best you can expect from an author and a reader perspective. So if you are a fast author who can write quickly, there's a good chance that traditional publishing can't keep up with you if you want to do more than 1 book a year with that editor and that publishing house. So just a thing to know. I write slightly too fast for trad. It was one of the reasons I decided to do indie publishing as well. That said, they did push 2 of my books very fast. So again, for those of you who've been with me from the very beginning, Soulless came out. It did unexpectedly well. Nobody was expecting it to do that well. They really weren't. No one was expecting, and you can tell that from various reasons, but no one was expecting it. It performed extremely well, and so fortunately, I had already written Changeless by the time it started to do really well, so they were ready with that. So they brought Changeless out tight as the second book in that series. They didn't wait an entire year. I think it was maybe 8 or 9 months. And then they had me write Blameless really quickly as well. So, yeah. Oh, I have a question on YouTube. No, come back. No, come back. Oh, it fades it away before I can read it. Oh, man. Annie wants to know if I knew when I started writing San Andreas Shifters how many books there would be. No, I didn't. It's one of those that I'm still not sure how many books there will be. Okay, back to the timing. So traditional publishing, once a year is what you can expect. Generally, it's once every couple of years. Depending on the speed of the writer. If the writer's quite slow, it can be once 7, 8, 10 years. You know, you never know. That's dependent on the writer, but it tends to be slower than in indie as a rule, because in indie we can control it to our own speeds as authors, and a lot of indie authors are relatively fast writers. So, Tinkered Star Song. When I set out to do Tinkered Star Song, because I'd written all of those books back to back, and because they're very linked, so I figured everybody would want to know what happened next. I released them once every 2 months, which is a kind of a rapid release. Once a month is what they say you should do if you're really doing rapid release, but I wanted to experiment with various other things, and I had 3 books to experiment with, which I very rarely do. That's not usually my style as a writer, is to write that many books all at once that quickly. So I decided to do this once every 2 months release pattern, and I'm never doing that again. It was not a good experiment, and it nearly broke me. It was too much promotion for me, and I'm not like in your face or advertising when I have a new book release as much as some, but it's just a different part of my brain is engaged when I'm doing that part. When I have to do all the formatting, when I have to, like right now, I'm about to get a sample of the first chapter up on the blog. That requires like 12 steps. You wouldn't believe how insane it is to try and get the formatting correct on the blog. Because, you know, it's just like stuff like that. It's just insane. It just takes days to do all of this stuff. And so sort of the promo side of a release eats my brain for a lot longer and for a lot more. And it also takes up a lot of my creative energy, which I then cannot spend writing. So while I am releasing a book, it's really hard for me to write anything else or write anything new. Now I can work on nonfiction. That doesn't tap into the same kind of my brain, but it's a lot of focused labor and spreadsheet and tracking and data and all of this other stuff when I'm releasing that is weirdly exhausting in a way that just writing fiction is not. Writing fiction is also exhausting, but it just uses a different part of my brain. I don't know how else to articulate it. And doing those 3 books back to back essentially took about 7 months of my life just for that part of my brain. And that was not good. That was not healthy, and it didn't work. So I'm not going to do that again. I really like the release of 2 books a year, or sometimes 2 books in a silly project. Or a short story or something like that. And that basically gives me breathing room. So I can ramp up and do some release stuff and some production stuff like what I'm doing right now for Dratsie Dilemma. And then I can kind of put most of that on the back burner, just check in with you on social media and on these lives and with the newsletter, and mostly spend my time writing the next piece of fiction until I have to ramp up for release again. And if I only have to do that kind of ramp up and release thing a couple times a year, that's just way more suited to my personality, it turns out. But I didn't know that until I tried to release 3 books back to back. I mean, I did release 3 books back to back, but it was really taxing. So that kind of release, I don't imagine I'll ever do again. Yeah, I mean, I never say never because things always change. And you know, if I've learned nothing else doing this for, 16, 17 years now, it's that I change in how I relate with my fiction and with my writing and with production and with the business and with the industry. So I try never to use pejoratives, but I think it highly, highly unlikely I'll ever do a release that fast again. That it was a lot, and I think it was too much for me. I get a question here that doesn't have a question mark at the beginning. Don't forget to put that question mark at the beginning. When going over a series grand plan, how to help identify what is the next book? That's interesting. So if you're writing a linked series where it's an arc of plot and main character that's holding the series together, and that you have an end game in mind, then you know what book to write next because the story is telling you what book you write next. So something like this kind of series, right? Or the Tinker Star Song series. You know what to write next because it's the middle book in a trilogy. And the middle book in a trilogy has certain things it does as part of its role. Think about movie trilogies, for example. Right? The middle book has a specific style that it goes to. So you sort of know what your broad structure is, and you tend to know what your story structure is because presumably you have an idea of what your end game is. One hopes. So that kind of series, you know what's next. In terms of like the San Andreas books, so series that are more linked. So the way the romance genre tends to write series is that you have a shared setting and perhaps an arc of a community that's moving through time, if not space, and into which you drop or reimagine existing characters as the new leads, but the rest of the characters are relatively familiar and sort of stay in place. So that kind of shared community series, for lack of a better way of putting it. That is a good question. I don't know how other authors do it, and I'm not sure I have like particular advice on how you would do it. Like part of the way I did it with the Parasolvers and picking up somebody like these two, like the Madame LeFou, was I chose to write a book for her because I knew she was super popular and because I had left her without a happy ending and I wanted personally to give her a happy ending. I really wanted to write a sapphic romance. I really wanted to see Madame LeFou get the girl, and so I felt sort of compelled to write her for you, for the readers, but also for myself to see that particular character happy. So that is how I chose to write that one. Now, I chose from a publication perspective to actually write the first Parasol Protectorate spin-off with an unlikable character And I did that intentionally. So I chose, this is the first book I ever wrote and published indie that tied into the Parasolvers. And I chose to write this one. It's the starter of a little companion series, but they are standalone piece companion series. So this is a companion series, is the Delightfully Deadly series. It's the spy characters grown up and being spies and assassins. But I specifically chose Prussia. That was very intentional because I wanted to write a character that you didn't like very much. Partly, I wanted to see if I could make you like a character, or at least read a character that you thought you didn't like, because I love to experiment on my readers. Like, what are authors but Machiavellian emotional manipulators? We want to see what we can make you feel, right? That's why we put our art out into the world. So I wanted to do it for that reason. But I also wanted a low impact start. I wanted to mess up. If something went wrong on the production end of bringing this book out into the world, if it were Biffy and Lyle's story, or if it were Madame LeFou's story, and I messed up, like I missed the deadline, or the print edition didn't roll out properly, you would be very upset. But if I make that mistake with a character that you don't like very much, you're much less upset at me if I make a mistake. And there's always going to be mistakes. There's always mistakes. Every launch has mistakes in it. So that's why I chose this particular book and this particular character and this particular series, because I wanted something a little low impact for the very first one. So there is strategy in that regard. Now I'm pretty comfortable, so I kind of write what I want to write and which character I want to write in what series I write. So that's what's going on there. I hope that kind of answered that question. Does that help the like planning out question? Now I pick up and write and choose to write things that just inspire me or interest me, or I need for escapism, or I need emotionally, or I need for my career. But I encourage you, if you are like starting out, like you're transitioning to becoming an indie author from traditional, so you're becoming hybrid, or if you're just starting out as an indie author, to actually try the whole publication process with something that's a little bit low impact first. So publish a couple of short stories or a novella. Don't dive straight in with your baby, with your beloved novel, Great American Novel, or whatever it is. Because you need to make sure the systems work first. You need to make sure Amazon isn't going to red flag you and accuse you of copyright on yourself, which, yes, has happened to me like 4 times. So like you just want to test the systems with something a little bit low impact first. So that if it's a problem you can work on fixing, rather than a complete failure or a tragedy, which it would be if it was the book everybody wanted from you. So there's some stuff about like choosing the series is. Now you'll see in some books I'm sort of seeding the next relationship that's going to be dealt with, and some books I'm not. So I did that with the San Andreas books, slightly unsuccessfully with the Enforcer Enigma, because you all thought it was going to be Trick and Kettle. And it's not Trick and Kettle, but there's a very good reason why, and it will be explained in the book. So I'm sorry, but also I'm very tricksy. And yeah. Scrolling through. I know there have been a couple of YouTube questions. I'm going to try and resurrect those in a second. I answered that question. Thank you for putting the question mark at the beginning. Much appreciated. And yes, I'm really good at decoding the terrible things that is now happening to autocorrect on all of our computers and phones. So don't worry about misspellings, or not misspellings, just weird words that they've decided now work. Reese asks about insights from LGBTQ plus as to regards trials and tribulations. Well, I am queer, so that's helpful. But in terms of like queer identities that are not my own, yeah, I have sensitivity readers, sometimes multiple sensitivity readers, generally speaking drawn from my own community, because I hang out in it here. So very helpful. There is, however, I would recommend a resource called Writing the Other. They don't necessarily staff sensitivity readers, but they can direct you in the direction of sensitivity readers if you need to hire one. And generally, I am one of those authors who would recommend it. You want to have, especially if you're writing major characters or a main character who is not of your background or identity, then it's a really good idea to get a sensitivity reader to make sure you're not messing up badly. So that is what I do. TK asks, any sapphic ideas for the SAS series? Yes. So I dropped Fast and Lennis a little while ago. And Lennis is one of those characters that I would love to have like spin into a sapphic line. We'll see. I actually have a sapphic piece I really want to write that may or may not be tangential to that universe, or it may be like contemporary. I know, or like historical, but like not distant historical. I'm percolating on it. I just had a writing retreat with a new author bestie, and we were talking quite a bit about sapphic romances in particular, and it has made me think about what I want to write and what I want to put out into the world that is part in contributing to that community in particular. And the answer is there's something, but I'm not sure if it's going to manifest anytime soon. But there's definitely something where there wasn't, if you would ask me that question a mere 2 or 3 months ago. S.H. Klein asks, with the San Andreas Shifters, will we see female shifter stories? Same kind of question. So the answer is there. That is the same answer. That was easy. Also, who doesn't love our Kelpie character? She's one of my favorites. Also plays a small but mighty role. Actually, there's a fantastic crystal clutching lesbian character in the Dratsie Dilemma series who might be one of my favorite new characters. So, yeah, plus Miss Trickle shows up again. So, yay! Series with definite endings. There is a comment which ties very much to something I'm passionate about with, which is somebody says that they really, it's not a question, so I'm not going to call them out, says that they really love series that have a definitive ending. And I have to say, I am on your side, both as a reader and as a writer, which is why I finish my series. So, sometimes I leave them kind of open-ended in the case of the San Andreas pack, but don't worry, I always leave the pack happy and contented. Like, I'm never going to leave anybody in peril or, brokenhearted. Like, I just don't do that. But my sci-fi fantasy series that are linked, like the Tinkered Star Song or the Parasol Protectorate or whatever, I tend to write an ending, and I like writing endings. I think I'm pretty good at endings, so that's part of it. I enjoy tying everything up in a neat little bow. I tend to think the final books in my series are my best books. Because I get this just such satisfaction of tidying everything up, because I always build world building mysteries into my books as well. You learn a lot, not just about the characters, but also about how the world works by the end of all of my series. So that's really satisfying and fun for me as a writer as well, because I've taken you on this journey where you spent time with these characters, but you're also slowly learning more about the world that these characters inhabit, and hopefully by the end you feel like you've learned a bit more about that as well. So I think Timeless, Manners and Mutiny, and Reticence and Dome 6 are like some of the best and strongest books that I've written because they're the final books in series. So yeah, I totally agree. If it is a linked plot series, so if it is a series where the author has made it clear or is writing in a genre where it's clear that the series is going to have a beginning, middle, and end, as well as each book, I really prefer, don't tell anybody, to wait until the series is finished before I start. I mean, I will often buy the earlier books in the series in order to support the author, but if it is a series that is gonna have a beginning, middle, and end, I've been heartbroken too many times, and we can all name names, by authors who haven't finished the series. And I've just been waiting for so long. And part of the heartbreak comes from, I have a terrible memory, an awful retention, and I will have entirely forgotten everything about the series by the time the final book comes out. And then I'm like, now I have to reread all of the other books, and it's just, and then I'm exhausted. And partly it's because I come out of, you know, the 80s and 90s as a fantasy sci-fi reader, and we had series that weren't ended because the publisher dropped the author because the series didn't sell well enough. So we never got our ending for purely commercial reasons. Or the author very inconveniently died and therefore couldn't finish the series. I mean, which is a terribly embarrassing thing to do. So, like, I'm a realist and a fatalist. And so, like, one of the reasons I give you all completed series is because I could get run over. And it would be great if you had series that I had finished and not some poor other author had to finish, but also just, like, completed series. So you have that to hold on to in case something happens to me. So I know, a very, like, brutal reason to like finishing series, both as a writer and as a reader, but there it is. It's a reason. I think it's a pretty good one. Katie asks about Crudrat. Speaking of unfinished series, my bad. Sometimes I also lie and betray myself. A lot of times I lie. I'm a professional liar. I'm a fiction author. Yes, Crudrat. Now Crudrat, as far as I'm concerned, it does have a satisfying ending, but it also makes it clear that there could be another book. And I have always intended to write another book. And hopefully, before I die, I will write that other book. It is on the docket. I do have it in the list. The issue with Crudrat, if there is one, from a me perspective, is the voice is particularly strong. So I have to like climb back into Mara's voice in order to write that second book in that series. And that's going to take a little work from me. The other issue with that book and that series, such as it is or isn't, is that it's one of my weakest performing books. And I always knew it would be. It's not a popular genre at all, YA, adventure, or sci-fi, sadly. So yeah, that's another reason, is like I can't bank on good sales for the second book in that particular series. So it would have to be a passion project, which means I would need room both in my finances and in my life to like take the time to climb back into that voice, which is going to take me more time than normal, and then write that book. But I do have the notes for it. I have the title for it. I know exactly what's going to happen. So I do intend to write it. It's just been a while. I know, I apologize, but clearly I still love that universe because I keep writing in it, so it will happen. Right, so that answers that question. Polyamorous romance, would I ever write one? I would love to. And there are a couple of characters, cough cough, who I notedly haven't written, even though, cough cough, certain people really want me to, because I know they have a polyromance in their future. And that's why I haven't written it. Because the pronouns, especially in the sex scenes, my goodness, so complicated when you have more than two. It's already complicated enough if you have two people with the same pronouns. When you have multiple pronouns being slung around. In English, it's just very cumbersome. We have a cumbersome language where pronouns are concerned. Curses. So yes, that's why I haven't written it. No, it isn't just that. But yes, I would love to write one. And when a character happens that says that they are poly, I have either like rested them on the sidelines waiting to be picked up again, or I have, made all the extensive notes, and I would definitely like to write one in the not too distant future, quite frankly. I think it'd be really fun, and I think it would be challenging, and I do feel like as a writer we should move in the direction of greatest challenge. So the things that scare me are the things that I try to write, at least a bit of it in each new book, to see if I can stretch, to do it because other people haven't, or other people don't do it as often. So yeah, I would love to do a polyromance. It'll happen. I have faith. SH Klein is asking a little off the topic of series, but it's fine. We have the time. It's been almost 45 minutes, so we don't have much time left, but I'll address this one. When I was first writing the Parasol universe, did I make up places or use real places? I mostly used real places, but I morphed them. So the money of the actual physical cities or what have you exist, or once existed under the name I use, or they don't now exist under that name, for example. But I morph them the way they are laid out. So I would look at the layout of the city at the time period and then shift it sometimes. So add a dirigible port, obviously. Or burn down half of it and rebuild it in a specific way. So yeah, they exist, but they are skewed, much like the reality of werewolves, etc. is skewed. There's some cute comments happening. Thank you, everybody. You're so adorable. I'm scrolling through looking for additional questions. That's why there's a low. Lavender asks another one. Lavender asks, do I have any suggestions for finding new authors or series that aren't being fed by the dreaded algorithm? Oh, goodness gracious me. It's really hard, isn't it? They say I got a lot here, but I'm always looking for more. Honestly, one of the places I go and would go now is the Facebook group, which I know is terrible because Facebook itself is an algorithm machine of doom and crisis. But if I were looking for a new series right now, I would go to the Parasol Protectorate Facebook group and I would say, I'm looking for a new series. I want it to be completed because it's me, and I would like it to have these things. Female main character, queer romance, blah, blah, you know, 3 to 5 books, no more, etc. I would like lay out a bunch of things I want that I would like the universe to write for me, and then I would ask all of the readers in that group to give me some ideas and thoughts. Because I know that group shares my taste, because it's my group, right? I also will go to friends who I know are readers. So I have a cadre of friends from various times of my life, from different workspaces, from working at the Renaissance Fair, from college or graduate school, who I know read the kinds of books that I really like and enjoy, and I would ask them for recommendations. I call these my taste curators. I used to have bloggers that I would follow who did this, but I don't anymore. Yeah, I very rarely, I mean, you might check out some Goodreads lists if you are looking in a sort of broader genre. Some of them are still trustworthy because they're voted on. They're not necessarily dependent on algorithms, but I mean, that's old school, the Goodreads lists. How old am I? I'm ancient, everybody, ancient. Yeah, but I like, ask for recommendations is the best way. You can Google my name and then recommendation lists. I have a lot of recommendation lists out there because I get asked this question all the time, you know, because I can only write so fast. Most everybody reads faster than I write. So I get asked for recommendations of books and series. Yeah, so I have a couple blog posts out there which have them. Another question, how do I keep track of the different series' voice when writing stories simultaneously? What a good question. I don't write simultaneously. That is how I keep track. I can't do that. I tried to do it and ended up having to take a 2-year delay on a contract at the time because it turns out I can't do that. I am one of those authors who can only write one fresh thing at a time. I can edit and write sometimes, and I can write nonfiction and fiction at the same time, which is one of the reasons I started writing nonfiction, because it doesn't take the same thing from me. So yeah, that's a big one, is I don't keep writing things simultaneously. I can't. I find out the voices get cross-pollinated and muddied. So what I have to do if I'm writing the next book in a series and I haven't written in that series for a while is reread the previous book or all of the previous books in that series to get back in the right headspace and voice. That's one thing I do. And yeah, and then I'll just start writing the next book in that series. And that usually gets me in the correct mindset and the correct frame. But I then just focus in and tunnel in and write that one book. When I'm writing fiction, I'm usually only working on one piece of fiction at a time. It helps. I don't have ADHD or anything like that, so I'm somebody who can focus that way. I have many friends who write multiple things at once, and I have no idea how they do it. I don't get distracted by the ooh shiny. Occasionally I do feel a lull where I'm like, oh, I'm never going to finish this book. It's too much work. Like, I still do get that, even after 30 books. But I buckle in, I put my nose to the grindstone, I work on the one book that needs to get finished and needs to get written, no matter how hard it gets. If I have ideas or ooh shinies, or I'm being distracted by some other universe or some other story, I just make notes and then I go back to the thing that needs to get written because it needs to get written. Reese asks, is there a tentative short story for our Polly Katsuni in the San Andreas Shifters? What's her name? Chrysanthemum? No, that's the... Is that her primary? I can't remember her name. You're right. No, I don't have a short story for them. The Oakland contingent. I love them very much though, so maybe I'll write them. I will say that the next book I'm writing is gonna have a Kitsune, or Kitsune. I don't know how to pronounce the Japanese, main character. Although she's not Japanese. She's the, Chinese variant, shall we say. She is a fox spirit character, a fox shifter, will be the main character in the next thing I'm writing, and very excited about her. She is awesome. She is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old, and she's very snarky, and she is not putting up with any of this werewolf nonsense, and she's great. So I'm very much looking forward to writing her. I think you guys will love her. She is awesome, but she is a new character. She's not a pickup from one of the previous series. Gladiola, thank you, June. Wonderful. Yes, Gladiola, you're right. No, I had not intended to write Gladiola as a short story, but it sure would be fun because she's sure is a wild character. Katie asks about ace romances. I actually have thought about writing ace main character for the first time in a long time as I move myself personally into a different kind of life. I hadn't before. Simply because I struggle personally to identify with ace, but I'm moving more towards that direction, shall we say? But that's a different series. That's a whole new series, and that's very much in the hind part of the brain. That's very much a percolator. I don't want to start a new series right now. So, but yes, I've thought about it, I should say, but nothing concrete has happened yet. That one hasn't even had an epiphany moment. In other words, I haven't even seen a scene of those characters yet. So, we got a 10-minute warning from the lovely Ty. Thank you. Hello! I'm getting some late joiners saying that they're tuning in and loving my books. As each client asks how the Pops is doing, the Pops is doing fine, remarkably fine, for about to be 91. I am going to take a look at YouTube and see if they have questions. Annie asks, did I know when I started writing the San Andreas Shifters how many books there would be? Oh, I think I got this one. I think I addressed this one pretty clearly. The short answer is no, and I still don't know. So, good. That was just the one question from YouTube. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in. We only have a couple more minutes, and it has been delightful talking to you. It looks like in bifurcating between YouTube and Facebook, I got about the same amount of people as normally tune in to one of these lives. So that's interesting. People are saying that they love my books. Thank you. And they hope I do an ace character. I would love to at some point. I really would at this juncture. Oh, Karen asks an interesting question for us to end on, which is, when I talk about having a story like percolating on the back burner, about how long do they percolate for? I don't know. That's a little bit like asking how long it takes me to write something. So about how long do they percolate for? Sometimes, like with the case of the second Crudrat book, for a decade it's been percolating. Sometimes, like with the Tinkered Star Songs, those books percolated for like a very short amount of time, like maybe a month or two before I was like, oh no, I gotta write this. Like the characters just start like talking at you. And in the case of that one, like singing at me and screaming at me. And I was like, oh, I have to write you all. Sorry, please shut up while I write. Please talk slower so I can get it down real quickly. So yeah, it really depends on how noisy the characters are. But yes, as Karen is saying, sometimes for years, they can just be like, and then I don't know what it is. I mean, who can tunnel into the muse and creativity and why creativity happens? But something happens, and suddenly that one needs to be written. Like suddenly I'm like, oh, it's you. Oh, hi. Hello. So yeah, I don't know. Sometimes they percolate for a very short amount of time, and sometimes it takes forever. I mean, it's like cooking a dish. Sometimes it's a stir fry and it's fast and easy, and sometimes it's a stew. Sometimes it's frickin', you know, a pressure cooker or a slow cooker, you know. Sometimes it's a pit in the ground that's gonna take 3 days. Somebody's asked about The Fifth Gender and Tris, and that is the other book that's on the back burner and percolating. So Card Rat, the second book, Tris, the second book. Both of them I have very good ideas for. And yes, I just got a question, which it works for everybody, which is, will there be a replay available of this video because you just tuned in later because the algorithm is wild? And the answer is yes. For YouTube, it will probably be the horizontal version that comes off of Facebook, and I'll post that later to my channel, just to my main channel, because I have no idea how this vertical live is even working. I literally have no clue what's going on over there, except that 20 people are watching and you guys asked questions and commented, which I appreciate very much. For the Facebook Live, it gets held on my page and just sort of sits there for sometimes 30 days, sometimes forever. Facebook's very willy-nilly about whether it will let it happen or not. But also you too can talk over to YouTube and see the replay of this video there, and on YouTube it lasts forever, so far as I can tell. So, or as long as technology gives us in their idea of forever. Thank you all so much for joining me. This has been a delightful conversation. I am so glad that we got to talk the whole time pretty much about series and writing series. To me, it's something really, really interesting. It's often a question that when authors get together, we ask each other, like, what kind of books do you write, in terms of like, do you write book lengths but linked together in a series? Because it's a different kind of writing and it's a different kind of using your brain. So I really appreciate you all joining me and asking questions. And if you're tuning in later, still feel free to ask questions. And definitely, if you're up for it, tell me some of your favorite series, because I think it's a cool conversation and to think about. And I love knowing what everybody's reading. Whether it's my books or not, you can talk about other series. I did. So, yeah. Thank you again. I hope you all have a lovely weekend or start to your week. And as I always say, please take really good care of yourself and somebody else if you can. Eat something or drink something tasty for me and tell me how awesome it was later. And have a lovely rest of your day. And I'll see you all next time.